of a wall representing enclosed, being enclosed. The Gimel is a picture of a foot represents a gathering. Combined, they mean enclosed gathering. The gathering together for a festival. Think about that. The participants of a festival would gather together and dance in a circle. And to give you an example, our word in the Hebrew language, in the English language, our word hug is a derivative from the term chug, which is derived from hug. And when we hug somebody, basically what are we doing? We are encircling that person. This is what we do. Okay, so we have all of these ideas now in regard to something being cyclical. Even when it comes to Chag or the feast, okay, it is based on a cycle. Which is why, again, the sun operates and functions on a cycle, the moon operates and functions on a cycle, and what we're about to find out, so do the stars. They function and they operate on a cycle. Okay, now, another thing we want to take a look at before we move any further, this is coming from 2 Kings chapter 23 and verse 5. Okay? It says, "And he put down the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Yahudah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Yahudah, and in the places round about Jerusalem. Them also that burned incense unto Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the planets, and to all the hosts of heaven." Now, I wanted to touch on this particular verse right here, because one of the things when it comes to translations, see, in translations, which is why it's important to go back to the original, not necessarily saying you have to become a Hebrew scholar, because the Most High, by His Spirit, can reveal His Word to somebody who has absolutely no knowledge of the Hebrew. So we're not saying that. But what we are saying that once you get into the mode of studying the Word of the Most High, and what it truly means to take the Word at face value, is to at least have a basic understanding of Ivri, or the Hebrew language. Now that's important because somebody reading the English, they would read this and automatically they would think that the Bible is actually supporting the existence of other planets besides the earth. That is not the case. That is not true. There are no other planets. He created one planet, the earth, the land. That's it. Everything else out in the what we refer to as outer space, or what the Holy Scripture refers to as the heavens, you have the sun, you have the moon, and you have the stars. That's it. Okay? Now, the word where the term planets is coming from, you find that in number 4208. That word is mazalah, mazalah. And it's derived from another term, or it's connected to another term in Hebrew, and that word is number 5140, and that term is nazal. Now the term nazal means to drip. Okay, now let me read this definition, keeping that in mind, that the word that it's derived from, nazal, means to drip. So it says, apparently from 5140, in the sense of raining. Now think about rain, and why is this term being used in the sense of raining? Take your mind back now to the sky during the nighttime, on a clear sky, and you look up and you see all the stars. They look like drops of light. Okay, that's what it looks like. So he uses this term because it indicates dropping or drip, to drip or to shed by trickling. Okay, now the word nazal. Now it says here a constellation, and here again in the definition, that is a zodiacal sign, meaning the zodiac, which of course we don't necessarily believe in the zodiac, and there's some truth to the zodiac, not saying that these signs are what they are. There's some truth in the zodiac in the sense of the positioning of the stars. That's the truthful part. In regard to what they were called, well, that knowledge we don't have. You know, we're familiar with them by other names, and we're going to be getting into that somewhat later on. But when it comes to the zodiac, we don't follow the zodiac in the sense of reading astrology and the astrology determining what we need to do for the day. No, that we don't follow. Because the scripture says not to look toward the signs of the heavens to be dismayed as the heathen are. We find that in Jeremiah chapter 10. Okay, so we don't follow that in that sense. We use the sun, moon, and stars for the reason that the Creator has given them. They are a natural clock in the heavens. That's what they are. They also point to other things because they were also said to be signs. But the focal point of this particular lesson is to focus on the greater light, the lesser light, and the stars being the natural clock that we're supposed to be using to determine time. Okay? Now, on the lines of that, there are two other passages we wanted to touch on since we're here, because people often run to them to support that there are other planets besides the earth, but we want to see the truth according to the Word of Yah. Now, in Ibri, or the letter written to the Hebrews, in chapter 1 and verse 2, we read, hath in these last days spoken unto us by his Son, whom he hath appointed heir of all things, by whom also he made the worlds. Okay, the focal point is the term worlds. And you find that term used again in chapter 11 and verse 3, which reads, through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of Elohim. Now, the term translated as worlds, it does not mean planets in the sense of, Mars or Jupiter, etc. That's not what it means. If you look it up, it comes from number 165, and this is in the Strong's lexicon for the Greek language. 165 is the word eon. Eon, and it is an age, referring to an age or time, and it denotes duration or continuance of time, but with great variety. And when it says that, it depends on the context that the word is used in. Question is, why would they translate that as worlds? Because it is used to mislead people in believing that the planets, as we've been taught in regard to the solar system, were created by the Most High. That is not true. Look that word up on your own time and see exactly what the Holy Scriptures is teaching. It is not supporting the existence of other planets. It simply means time, or the ages, in the sense of the various ages of humanity. That's what the word means. Okay? Now, that being said, let's go to 2nd Ezra. This is an apocryphal book. And we're going to chapter 6, and we're going to read verses 45 and 46. It says, upon the 4th day you commanded that the sun should shine, and the moon give her light, and the stars should be in order. Think about that. Now, when you think about the whole concept of order, right? That means that the stars should be in a particular arrangement. That's the implication there. That they are in a particular arrangement. In verse 46, it says, and gave them a charge to do service unto man that was to be made. This is, again, 2nd Ezra, chapter 6, verses 45 and 46. So what we're learning from this passage, the sun, the moon, and the stars were created to do service for humanity. What service? They are our natural clock. That's the service. Okay? Now, we may overlook the stars when we compare them to the greater light and the lesser light, but what we want to do, we want to keep in mind that when that was mentioned, signs, seasons, days, years, he said the greater light, the lesser light, and the stars. So they play a role. They have an order, and we're going to see some more passages to substantiate that. Now, in Tehillim, again, Psalms 136 and verse 9, we are taught, the moon and stars to rule by night. See? So it's not just that greater light sitting up there alone. It's the moon and the stars that are ruling by night. Okay? In Psalms chapter 8 and verse 3, it says, when I considered your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have ordained. So we're seeing one passage that says that the stars have an order. Now we're looking at a passage where the Most High is teaching us that the moon and the stars have been ordained. What does it mean to be ordained? So you go to the Hebrew section, number 3559. That word is kun. Kun. Okay? Properly, the term means to be erect. That is, to stand perpendicular. It means to stand upright, to stand straight. Okay? The primary action of this term is to cause to stand in an upright position, and thus the word also means fixed or steadfast. So when he says that the moon is fixed in its place, the stars are fixed in their place. That's what he means. And what are they fixed in their place to do? Again, they are a natural clock to teach man how to calculate time. Okay? Let's go to the wisdom of Shlomo, or wisdom of Solomon. We're going to chapter 13, and we're going to read verses 1 and 2. It says, "Surely vain are all men by nature, who are ignorant of Elohim, and could not, out of the good things that are seen, know him that is. Neither by considering the works did they acknowledge the workmaster, but deemed either fire, or wind, or the swift air, or the circle of the stars." You hear that? The circle of the stars. So what does that mean? This is not saying that each star is a circle of light. That's not what it's saying. The stars are positioned around the earth in a circular form, just like the sun travels around the earth, just like the moon travels around the earth. The stars also travel around the earth, again, in a circular form, in a circuit, in an orbit, if we believe what the scriptures teach. Okay? Now, we're given a glimpse into their positioning, because we have to also watch them when we are calculating time, and we're going to get to that in a moment. Let's go to Sirach, which again is from the Apocrypha. Chapter 43, verses 9 and 10, which reads, "The beauty of the heavens, the glory of the stars, an ornament giving light in the highest places of Yahweh. At the commandment of the Holy One, they will stand in their order and never faint in their watches." Now this passage here, it has a twofold meaning. Okay, we know that the stars, when you look at it in the context of being a sign, they can also point to the Malachim, or the angels. But it also is a reference to the actual stars, and he is telling us that they stand in their order. What's their order? What is the order of the stars? And never faint in their watches? Just like the moon is comparable to being a satellite, and I mentioned in the opening, the moon, sometimes it looks like it's big, sometimes it looks like it's small. You know why? Because it moves in and out. You also find that the moon, it can be high up in the sky, or it can be lower in the sky. That's because it's moving up and down. The moon, it moves in and out, it moves up and down. Now think of it in the context of being like a night watchman. See? It's shining light. And keep in mind, he put the moon and the stars to rule over the darkness of night. So it's there for a purpose, for a reason. It's a natural clock, but again, it has another purpose. Okay? It's a watchman. Likewise, the stars, they have watches, if we believe what the scriptures teach. Okay? Now let's go down to Wisdom of Solomon, once again, chapter 7, starting at verse 17. Let's see what else we learn. For he has given me certain knowledge of the things that are, namely, to know how the world was made, and the operation of the elements, the beginning, ending, and midst of the times, the alterations of the turning of the sun, which we've discussed, and the change of seasons, which we've also discussed, the circuits of years, and the positions of stars. So we're seeing evidence from Holy Scripture that the stars, they have been given an order. They have been ordained for a purpose. They are a circle forming around this earth. Okay? They move according to an order. They have watches. Now we're being taught they have very specific positions. What are those positions? Okay? Let's look at another one. In Yeshayahu chapter 13, verse 10, which is Isaiah, for the stars of the heavens and the constellations, that term translated as constellations, comes from number 3685. The word is Kasil. Kasil. Okay? Now, give me 1 second. I'm going to look something up real quick. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. So the word Kasil, it says, any notable constellation. It says specifically Orion, as if a burly one. So, but the idea again is of any constellation. But oftentimes this word has been translated as Orion, which is a particular constellation. Let's go to Job chapter 9. And the reason why we're going through these next set of passages is to show that the Most High has given names to the stars. Okay? Give me a second. Now I'm going to Psalms chapter 147 real quick. Thought just crossed my mind. So I just want to interject this one. Something he says about the stars. In verse 4. Psalms 147 verse 4. He tells the number of the stars. He calls them all by names. Let me read that again. He tells the number of the stars. So that means the Most High, He knows exactly how many stars are in the sky. We may not be able to count the stars, but He knows exactly how many stars are in the sky. And not only does He know how many are in the sky, each of them has a name. Think about that. Okay? Now, the reason why we were interjecting these next few passages, Isaiah 13:10, along with what we're about to read, Job 9, 7 through 9, which reads, which commandeth the sun, and it riseth not, and seals up the stars, which alone spreads out the heavens, and treads upon the waves of the sea, which makes Arcturus. Okay? Now the word in Hebrew was Aish, which is the constellation of the Great Bear, Orion, which we see in that is Kasil, and Pleiades, which is Kima in Hebrew, a cluster of stars, and the chambers of the house, of the south. Let me read that again. Verse 9, Job chapter 9. Which maketh Arcturus, Orion, and Pleiades, and the chambers of the south. So he's talking about particular stars now. Okay? And what we want to do, again, just understand that they do have names. Okay? In Amos chapter 5, verse 7 and 8. It says, you who turn judgment to wormwood and leave off righteousness in the earth, that make Pleiades and Orion, and turneth the shadow of death into the morning, and maketh the day dark with night, and that calleth for the waters of the sea, and poureth them out upon the face of the earth. Yahweh is his name. In other words, he's talking about that maketh Pleiades and Orion. He's talking about the stars. And Pleiades, Orion, of course, these are the names that man applies to them, but nevertheless, according to what we are learning, the stars do have names. That's important for us to know, okay? Because there's something we need to see now, all right? So, let me set this down for a moment. Let me make some room. And we're almost finished, fam. I'm not going to keep you too long with this one. We're going to just touch on this briefly. And most high willing, we'll be able to tie all of these things together. Okay? So, now I'm using the names. I'm using the names that we are familiar with for the purpose of familiarity. Okay? Now, this image, I want you to focus. I didn't put every sign. There are 12 signs of the zodiac, of course, but each of the 12 signs of the zodiac point to a collection of stars. Okay? Now, Aries, and keep in mind, I drew it this way because I want people to keep in mind the movement of the sun. Now, why is that important? Let's just briefly recap again. The way that the sun moves, we already understand with the setting of the sun determines the new day. And of course, the rising of the sun actually determines the daylight period, what is called morning. Okay, morning, when you look at the rising of the sun, you have its initial rise, then it hits the high point, which is the noon, then it sets. Then that's when the night comes in. Okay, cycle that we go through every day. But at the same time, right, while the sun is doing that, going through its motion, the days during the time of right after the equinox, where you have 12 hours of night, 12 hours a day, then the day progressively gets longer and longer and longer till you get to the solstice. That's the longest day. Then after the solstice, then it starts to get shorter and shorter, and then it gets short enough to where it's balanced again, 12 hours of day, 12 hours of night. Okay? Then it starts to decrease. The day gets shorter, and that night gets longer. Then you get to the winter solstice, and the night is the longest at that time. The day is the shortest at that time. But right after that, that's when the night starts to get short again, goes back up to the equinox, and then it balances itself out again. And then you enter right back into the sun entering into this